Hi there, and welcome to a Let's Type episode from the Commodore 64 Appreciation Society. This is a series where I type out a program from an old computer magazine or book, and then when I finish typing it in, I play it. I've typed in a lot of Commodore 64 games, but I've never seen anything quite like this. This one builds its levels from massive walls of numbers, and uses a proofreader that doesn't actually check what you typed in. It checks what the Commodore 64 thinks you've typed. And then there's the game itself. The screenshots for Castle of Doom are giving me serious Temple of Apshai vibes, which is a really good thing. So between that and this very unusual approach to proofreading, I am completely intrigued and cannot wait to see how it turns out. Let's get typing. You're not going to find many 64 books more popular than the Commodore 64 Games book by Mark and Clifford Ramshaw. Published in 1983, it went through multiple printings and was especially popular in Australia and Europe. And it's easy to see why. There are over 30 games in here. Everything from horse racing to flight simulators to poetry writing. Yes, poetry writing. But don't worry, there are some popular arcade-style games in here too, including Castle of Doom. Oh, and speaking of flight simulators, this one might look a little familiar. We covered a game called Night Pilot 64 on this channel a while back. It showed up about a year after this book in Commodore Horizons. And yeah, these look very similar. So either this is one heck of a coincidence, or somebody was doing a little bit of borrowing. One of the more clever additions in this book is a built-in proofreading program. And honestly, it's one of the most bonkers ones I've ever seen. It's called Chexsum, and at a basic level it works like most proofreaders. It generates a checksum for each line of code. If your number matches the one in the book, you're probably good. But that's where the similarities end. For starters, this thing doesn't live outside your program, it lives inside it. The code for Chexsum sits way up at line 62,000, safely out of the way, and when you want to run it, you just type run 62,000. It checks your code, lists the results, and when you're done, it has a function to erase itself from the program, which is already pretty unusual. But here's the part that really got my attention. Chexsum doesn't actually check what you typed. It checks what the Commodore 64 thinks you typed. Instead of reading your code as text, it walks through the program in memory, looking at the tokenized version, the same internal format the machine uses. It ignores things that don't matter, like extra spaces or comments, and builds its checksum from the actual instructions the computer sees, which is kind of brilliant for 1983. Hell, it's pretty brilliant more than 40 years later. And it also means you can use shorthand for basic commands, like a question mark for print, and still get the same checksum. It's a really cool approach, but it's not perfect. Because of how it calculates the actual checksum, some characters can end up with the same value, a right bracket and a 9 for example, which is maybe not ideal considering they're on the same key. And it happens inconsistently, so you can never be sure what's going on. This might be foreshadowing. So, the book was written by Clifford and Mark Ramshaw, and they aren't just random names on a cover. By the early 80s, Clifford Ramshaw was already being recognized as one of the more creative young programmers to come out of the bedroom coding boom in the UK. And he likely still would have been in school when he started working with Melbourne House, a publisher that spanned both the UK and Australia. And it's interesting because Melbourne House was closely tied to Beam Software, the same group behind classics like The Hobbit and The Way of the Exploding Fist. So even though this is a type-in book, it's not just a random collection of listings. This is coming out of the same pipeline and the same group of people that were helping define early commercial game development. And Cliff himself would go on to have a full career in the industry, which makes this code I'm typing here feel a bit different. It's not just a random basic listing. It's early work from someone who was right there at the start of it all. So, no pressure to get it right. As mentioned earlier, Chexsum is one of the more creative proofreaders that I've ever seen. But that's not the only interesting part of the code that I ran across while typing it in. In fact, I think this next bit is even better. Let's get into our code spotlight. Take a look at these data statements. They are completely unhinged. Just giant walls of numbers, hard to read, even harder to type. And somehow, they define every room in the game. But here's the twist. These aren't maps, they're instructions. They're kind of brilliant, and they contain the layouts for all 25 rooms in Castle of Doom. Each room is stored as a long string, and the game reads it 4 digits or 1 column at a time. Here's how it works. At the start of the program, each of these long data lines gets read into the A string array, 1 string per room. When you enter a room, the game jumps into the room building routine. From there, it grabs the current room, clears the screen, and starts looping across 20 columns. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The room string gets chopped into 4-digit chunks, which it puts in B string. The first 2 digits tell the game how many blocks to draw from the top, and the second 2 tell it how many to draw up from the bottom. So, something like this becomes this. The drawing routine then starts at the top and prints blocks downward, then it moves to the bottom of the column and draws up. So, one chunk of data creates a vertical slice of the room, and then it just repeats that until the whole room is painted. And if the data runs out before the room is complete, it just keeps using the last 4 digits to finish the job. So instead of storing every tile, it builds each room column by column. You're not storing the room, you're storing a compressed set of instructions. And that's how they managed to squeeze a 25-room dungeon into 25 data statements, which is kind of amazing. And also, how I nearly went blind typing it. Cool, right? The interesting thing about these data statements is that there are patterns to them, which makes sense when you consider that they represent rooms. That makes them a bit easier to type in, but you still have to be very careful. I think I got through them though, and we're ready to move on to the next step, running our proofreader. But first, let's just save this. And cool, 33 blocks, or just over 8K. That's a great size for a type-in. Large enough to contain some complexity, small enough that typing it in doesn't become a day-long project. This one took me about an hour and a half to complete. Alright, so on to the proofreading portion of tonight's performance. As I mentioned earlier, the proofreader is actually contained within the program, and it starts at line 62,000. So we'll just run that, and here they come. It's just a matter of following along with the checksums printed in the book. Oh, and already I can see a problem in line 5, 55, 160, 180. Okay, this is starting to move a bit too quickly, but we have 4 errors already. Let's just go take care of them. Alright, here's line 5. Just going through it. Oh, and there it is. 54282 should be 54292. Nice. And here's line 55. Oh, oops. That B should be an 8. That would have caused some interesting problems. I was having trouble keeping up with the checksums, so I decided to add a bit of code that stops automatically every 10 lines. Then, just press a key to continue. That makes it easier to cross-check the numbers in small chunks. Yeah, that's better. So that took almost as long as typing in the program. Having a proofreader is great and saves even more time, but I really do prefer the ones that show the values in real time. I ended up finding about 20 errors in total. Once I verify that everything works, I can then remove the proofreading code and save the final game. Oh, and that little routine I added? Turns out I didn't need it. Chexsum already lets you pause the display by pressing Run Stop. I really need to get better at reading instructions. I like mine better anyway. Alright, let's run it. Oh, this isn't good. So, do you remember that foreshadowing from a while ago? Well, here's the payoff. Check out the checksum value for line 2. It's 49.79, which matches what's in the book. Great, right? Yeah, not so much. Chexsum says everything is fine, but it isn't. Looking at the line itself, we can see the problem. There's a 9 where the trailing bracket should be. So we'll just fix that and run checksum again. And hey, look, the same value. Man, that's not good. And suddenly I'm wondering about every other line in the program. If there's a mistake already in line 2, there almost has to be some other issues, right? And yeah, there was one more problem, a data statement that had an incorrect value, which would have made one of the sprites look goofy. And again, the checksum values were the same in either case. But now I've reviewed every line of code manually, and I ran checksum one more time just to be sure. I actually think we're done now. Let's play some Castle of Doom. And here we go. Nice! Here's one of our rooms from those crazy data statements, and we can see a couple of sprites. In addition to our character, each of the rooms can contain up to 3 items, 2 monsters and a treasure. Gotcha. What a great little animation. The sounds are good too. I can move around with the WAD and X keys, and S lets me fire my gun. That's close to how every game works these days, but it's off just enough for it not to feel natural. It looks like I'm firing flowers, which I'm perfectly okay with. Oh cool, that question mark must be this room's treasure. Nice, another type of enemy. The sprite design is really cool, very colorful. The controls are sluggish though when there's an enemy in the room. That's basic for you. These enemies might be my favorite. I have no idea what they're supposed to be, but they're coming at me and need to die. See ya. Oh, how's that for quick karma? Apparently you can't bump into walls. This is giving me berserk flashbacks. Back to the beginning. And oh wow, check out that guy. That guy is now my favorite enemy. We have blobs, wisps, and really fast-moving robots. Man, that guy isn't fooling around. Can I turn? Nope, run away! Okay. What's going on with this guy? Can I even hit him? I'm gonna take that as a no. Is this guy supposed to be like this, or is it a glitch? I'm gonna go with glitch. Which is interesting. At this point, I'm very confident that the code is correct, but to be sure, I was able to find another copy of the game online and the same thing happened. So yeah, it's a problem in the published code. Eat it, robot. The castle layout is really cool. As we saw earlier, it's definitely not random. Each of the 25 rooms are hard-coded in those crazy data statements. And when you look into the code, you can actually see that the castle itself is laid out in a 5x5 grid. The current room you are in is represented by R, and the game tracks where you exit from. So if you exit to the right, R is simply increased by 1. If you go up, R increases by 5, and so on. What's really cool though is how much design went into this. These aren't random places. Hallways and exits need to line up with their adjoining rooms, and there are real boundaries. You can't go up from a room that is already at the top of the grid, for example. Very cool design. I can almost see 25 pieces of graph paper taped together on the wall. I also love how each enemy has its own movement behavior. Some of them, like the robot, come directly at you, very fast. Others, like the orange blob and the wispy galaxy guy, come at you, but slowly and with a bit of randomness. And the other guy, the multicolored spaghetti monster, he just floats around randomly. All of the monsters in the game follow the same movement routine. Basically, this says that if the enemy is to the left of my character, move right, and if it's above, move down. So they always move towards me. There are differences though. The main one is speed. Each of the monster types has its own speed. The robots is 6, while the spaghetti monsters is 2. And there's also randomness. A couple of the enemies will occasionally move in a different direction. This line here says that enemy type 3, which is that orange blob, will move in a random direction 70% of the time. This kind of thing is great. Each enemy feels unique, and you start to get a really good feel for what's in store for you as soon as you enter a room. I haven't run into that flickering problem again, which makes me think it might be a rare edge case that slipped through. My guess is that it has something to do with sprite collisions. The game is pretty loose with sprite handling in general. Enemies can overlap the wall graphics, for example. But collisions are still a big part of how it works. If an enemy hits your character, you die. And the game also checks collision registers while setting up each new room. So my suspicion is that the bug is happening during room setup. Maybe when one of the enemies spawns in a bad state, or overlaps with another sprite, and the collision flag gets cleared instead of handled properly. Or maybe it's just one of those PAL versus NTSC quirks. Since the program would have been written and tested on a PAL machine, it's possible that's the issue since I'm using NTSC. I'll have to play around with that. Either way, it sounds like a fun problem to dig into. And there are other possibilities for improvements as well. I would love to see a score on the game screen, for example. There's some room at the bottom where that would work, and if we're going to have scores, may as well have a high score as well. Also, having something fun happen, like a sound effect and a score showing, when you pick up the treasure would be cool too. And if you really want to be ambitious, how about giving the player a goal? Maybe there's a special treasure contained in one of the rooms that has to be collected, or even a series of treasures. There's a ton of possibility, especially when the foundation is this strong. And these are exactly the type of things that get discussed and solved on our Discord. Have you made a change to one of our type-ins that you'd like to share? Do you have a question about programming? Or maybe you just want to chat about your favorite games? This is the place for you. The community is super helpful and enthusiastic, and it's a great place to keep the spirit alive for our favorite computer. Feel free to drop in. There's a link in the description. But in 1983, there was absolutely no Discord. So Clifford and Mark Ramshaw would have had to do all this coding themselves, and they did a fantastic job. If the rest of the games in the book are as good as this, it's no wonder that it sold so well. I'm absolutely looking forward to diving back in and typing more of the programs. But right now, what I'm more interested in is diving back into Castle of Doom. See you next time. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please consider leaving a like or subscribing. And if you have any memories of Castle of Doom, the Commodore 64 games book, or any type-ins of your own, I'd love to hear them. Drop them in the comments. Hope to see you again.